Hello, and welcome back to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Baldwin, with my incredible co-host, Heather Crimson. And today we have a very special guest who I am so excited to bring here on the Quantum Health Connection, Danica, who is really an amazing homeopath, and more than just a homeopath, really. She's the founder of the International Golden Spiral School of Homeopathy. She created these golden spiral remedy and all these other essences, as well as being a family consultation facilitator and the blueprint essences. So we are really excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Heather. It's a real joy to be here. And what amazing work you're doing in the world, all the awareness that you're bringing. And I was scrolling through and seeing all the guests you've had. What an amazing journey you're on.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that I really appreciated your book that I just finished last week, and your story is so inspiring. And there's so many synchronicities and we would call like quantum, events that happen with how you start off in more kind of allopathic with the pharmaceuticals. And I think you were studying for pharmacy, right? And then that didn't quite work out. And then the influence of your mom was just so heartwarming. So heartwarming, and how she basically guided you, right, posthumously. And I just really appreciate that. So share with us, like, what are the most, like, how do you want people to understand where you're at now based on where you've been?
That's such a great question, Heather. And thank you so much. Gosh, do you know what? One of the things that I really love is I love the hero's journey or the heroine's journey that Joseph Campbell taught. And one of the quotes that Joseph Campbell used was, "You have to be willing to let go of the life you have planned in order to live the life that is waiting for you."
Yes.
And that very much fits and describes my journey through life. And it was quite weird for me because I got a scholarship and went to a private school, which in the UK, that's like to be privately school educated. I don't know what it's called in the US, but they're kind of like the more exclusive schools. They're kind of very expensive schools, they're very privileged education. And my parents were very working class. We couldn't have afforded that. I didn't come from that background, at all. And I felt actually when I first arrived, like, such a fish out of water. It took me about 3 years to finally kind of settle into being in that environment, and then loved it, just loved school so much. But it was a background where it was very expected that you would know what you were going to study at university. A lot of the girls went to Oxford or Cambridge. It was an all-girls school. It was, very kind of high achieving. And sometimes I wonder, I'd love to go back there and do a talk for the girls, but I don't know that it would be very welcomed by the parents, probably by the teachers, but not the parents. And my message to them would be, for some of you, it isn't going to work out how you're planning it right now and how your family are planning it for you. And it's going to be, if you, and I was so unprepared because I had all these expectations. I was so unprepared. It was so devastating for me when it didn't work out, because I was so clear. I'd had such a clear life plan from when I was 14 years old. I was going to be a pharmacist, and I spent 7 years working part-time in pharmacies. And at the age of 16, I knew my way around a pharmacy. I could tell you the indications and contraindications of every drug in the pharmacy. I was like a sponge, and I loved it. And so that was my world. And then when it didn't happen and it didn't work out, it was utterly devastating for me, because I had no other view of how life could be. And it was like I put all my eggs in one basket. And it's not the only time that things haven't worked out. There have been other times when I've literally thrown my heart and soul into something that hasn't worked out. And it's only now, being where I am now, that I'm like, oh, now I know why, because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where I'm supposed to be. And sometimes when I hear people who are like, I don't understand why things aren't working for me, I always just remember that quote from Dr. Joe Campbell, Professor Joe Campbell, and I just think that's why. It's because we're not where we're supposed to be yet. And for me, it's not about, it's really interesting. We measure success or doing well, or, having got somewhere by money or numbers. And to me, that's very kind of old world. It's are you are you serving? Are you truly living from your heart and doing that thing you're here to make a difference in the world with? And when you follow your passion, and this is all the hero's journey stuff, if you follow your passion, it doesn't always necessarily immediately bring financial rewards. You can't suddenly go, oh, I'm on some big like this, and this. But what it does do is it connects you in such a deep way to something much bigger than that, which is about true purpose and alignment. The rest comes, I think, in time, always. I really do believe that. But there's a whole journey there for me around I've had to do a lot of letting go to get to where I am today. But I'm so grateful to be where I am today, even though the letting go pain has been painful at times.
Yeah, I can so relate, because what I had planned for my life was never to be a homeopath and a health coach and to have a podcast. Like, I didn't plan for any of this. It was not something that I dreamed about as a little girl, not even once. In fact, I wanted to be a school teacher, and I did that for 15 years, and I taught special ed, and then I got really sick when I was there, and then it led me to a completely different path in life that I know is where I was meant to be, right? I know I'm moving towards my passion and purpose and more alignment. Like, I feel that within me. So, and there is a lot of grief though there. At the same time, there is the excitement and the passion and the purpose and the newness of something too. And the ability to help people with homeopathy and health coaching is a beautiful thing and a beautiful service. I've always been in service, right? But then there's this grief of letting go of that person that you were before, right? When you have like a health crisis, right there, you can't not have that, and you have to move through it. So I was really resonating. And then it like reminded me, I have never taken your golden spiral remedy, but it made me think of like, that's a remedy that can bring you back to alignment. But I think homeopathy in general is shifting that for most people, not just specifically in one remedy, but in all remedies. As long as it's the correct indicated remedy, it's gonna shift you in that direction that you're supposed to go. So
One of the things that I'm really big on teaching as part of the foundations and the culture of our school, and what we're here to support our students to become, but also to understand what I think actually fundamentally underpins part of the philosophy of the journey with homeopathy, is the teachings of Goethe, who inspired Dr. Hahnemann's philosophies. And Goethe was an incredible polymath, and he basically proposed this notion that we have a totality, that we are made up of a body, mind, soul, and spirit. And he was German. And so the words, when we hear them, kind of Gemut, Körper, Geist, and Seele. And he talks about how when we're truly in alignment, all of us is whole. And to me, that's what all holistic medicines and practices take us to. But there's the explanation of the understanding of what that truly means is really interesting to me. And I was taught by one of my tutors at school, gave a really wonderful analogy when we came across Goethe. And he said, when we go out of alignment, it's usually that the mind is not in alignment with the soul, or with the higher part of us that knows that there's a kind of bigger way. And what that can look like is, say you're driving down a road and it's a beautiful country lane and the beautiful kind of surrounds, and there's no one else around. It's a beautiful sunny day. You've got a convertible car, tops down, and you're drinking coffee out of a takeaway coffee cup, and your mind goes, oh, you can just throw that empty coffee cup in the trees, no one's going to notice. And if you do that, because there's some higher part of you, that higher aspect, the soul in Freud's terms, it's the superego, that kind of higher consciousness, knows that wasn't necessarily the most loving thing to do. It creates the disconnect, the dissonance. We then have a gap between the mind and the soul, or the spirit. And there's this piece around there's a whole piece there around the disquiet, the dissonance, the gap that creates a disquiet that allows dis-ease to set in. And I think that what homeopathy does is it reminds us, in a world where our mind is constantly bombarded with things to try to pull us away from what keeps us in alignment, that pulls us away from what we truly know at our core on a soul level. That higher part of us just knows. We're constantly being pulled away from that. And I think homeopathy just helps bring us back into that totality space, brings us back to that wholeness, where we're able more easily to say, actually, that doesn't resonate with me. This resonates with me for my path. And being able to hold better boundaries for ourselves in our lives, with others, that to me is what part of the power of homeopathy is. It's just about a calling back to yourself.
Yes, and your golden spiral is embodiment of that, right? That's basically the ethos of it. How did you come to create that remedy?
So I've been fascinated by the golden spiral for about 15 years now. And I had basically, I'd worked with some herbalists and had been fascinated by how I was actually considering studying herbal medicine, and did actually at one point sign up for a course, and things didn't work out quite at the time. And I love herbs. I think medicinal herbs, I think, are just amazing. And I was really interested by how here you'd have a plant medicine which would have maybe 100 plant chemicals working together to help somebody be well. And then what a pharmaceutical company will do is it will say, oh, there's this one chemical out of those, say, 100 plant chemicals, that must be the one that has this effect on the body. We're going to take that chemical, we'll copy it, we'll isolate it, copy it, turn it into a tablet or a pill or a capsule. But what then happens is you take away the synergy of all the other plant chemicals that are working together in a harmonious way. And so, and I just had this moment where I was like, because I just had an aha where I just thought, I reckon that what goes on with plants is that there is a golden spiral. Everything in nature is expressed through the golden spiral. Everything in the natural world. We see it in the spirals of our DNA. This is basically, the golden spiral is a very sacred geometric symbol. And the way that it's formed is that there are a series of numbers called the Fibonacci sequence that were discovered by an amazing Italian mathematician called Fibonacci. And the sequence goes the way you add two numbers together to get the next number in the sequence. So 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and on you go. Now, if you were to take a piece of graph paper and draw those numbers on the graph paper, so you'd start with 0, and then you go across 1 square, and then across 1 square, and then across 2, and then 3, and then 5, and then 8, you get this perfect geometric spiral, which is incredible. And that's the golden spiral, or the golden mean, or the Fibonacci spiral, sometimes it's called. Now, what's truly amazing to me about the spiral and the mathematics here is that if you take one number in the Fibonacci sequence and you divide it by the number before it, now if you go up into the higher numbers, say 89 divided by 55, or 8 divided by 5, you get this number 1.618. This is a really special number, phi, represented by the Greek letter F. Now, you don't get exactly 1.618 in the lower numbers of that sequence, but you get very, very close to 1.618. But once you get to 89 in the sequence and higher, then it's always 1.618. And there's an amazing mathematician and composer and scientist called Manfred Clynes, who was interested in emotion and studying emotion. He wanted to find out if we could measure the frequencies of emotion. So he studied anger and hate and jealousy and all sorts of things. And when he studied love, he found that it resonates with the frequency of 1.618.
Oh, perfect.
So in the Fibonacci sequence, in the golden spiral, which is the expression of the Fibonacci sequence, you have the vibration of love. And you see it in all of nature. So you see it in the DNA, you see it in how blood spirals through the vessels, you see it in
What vortexing?
Yeah, exactly. In any vortex, literally any vortex will follow those mathematical numbers. You'll see it in the symmetry of our faces, in how our limbs unfurl, in how the proportions of our reproductive organs, it's how the baby is born. when it's born vaginally, it is said to be how the soul enters the body and also how the soul leaves. And all of the chakras as well spiral in that particular amazing geometry. And we then see it in nature, in how plants unfurl. I'm looking at my garden as I say this, how plants and leaves and trees unfurl. We see it in how tornadoes are formed, in how winds are formed, in how the sea currents are formed. We see it in how the planets orbit each other through the solar system, if you're not a flat earther. So it's incredible. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And to me, I've loved this spiral for so long, and I was standing with these herbs and I was looking at these herbs and I was thinking about how there are these 100 plant chemicals and how pharmaceutical companies isolate one out of maybe around 100 in every plant. And I just had this aha moment of thinking, I have a theory that all those plant chemicals, if we were to look at them and how they're arranged, we will see the golden spiral. We will see golden spiral geometry in the plants themselves. And I've only just literally this week found out that they're seeing that with chlorophyll. The arrangement of chlorophyll is in the spiral.
Wow.
And my theory is that that is how the body, so I wrote a book called Nature's Medicine Code, which is a theory that says that the way that the body recognizes what's healthy for it, what's not healthy for it, is based on whether it contains that geometry, whether it contains that vibration of love.
Wow.
And if it doesn't contain that vibration of love, the body will then do everything it can to try to get rid of it, because it will go, nope, that's not a vibration I recognize. So the one plant chemical that's been isolated, replicated and turned into a pill with a pharmaceutical drug, the body will go, no, I don't know what to do with that. And then we see side effects, which to me, I think, are the body trying to get rid of something that it considers to be a dud note. And I then, when I became a homeopath, and I became a homeopath because, like you mentioned, Vanessa, I got sick. And my intuition when I got sick said homeopathy. And I still had my pharmacy brain. Even herbs, were acceptable to me. I could understand that herbs could work. I'd already studied reflexology and all sorts of things, and healing even. But homeopathy was like the last bastion. I was like, that to me, I still thought was rubbish.
And it's also esoteric because it's really just a frequency. Yeah, it's just
a placebo. And I'd already seen it do two things miraculously that had taken me by surprise, but I'd still kind of not paid full attention.
What were those two miraculous things that it had done? I'm curious.
So the first time I probably had homeopathy was I was pregnant with my son. I'd had really heavy, serious morning sickness. I didn't have myasthenia gravis, but it was like one step down. I was vomiting every day, and I was 4 months in, and I was at a festival, and a friend of a friend at the festival was a homeopath, and she just gave me one sepia 30C, and that was it. It was done.
Yeah. The morning sickness was gone. Perfect.
It was gone. And no more morning, and I was like, and I didn't kind of like think too much about it, even though it was amazing. But it was when my son was born, and he had colic, and he was 6 weeks old. And he'd been screaming for 6 weeks, loving with his colic. And I tried everything as we do. And in the end, out of sheer desperation, I was like, well, nothing else has worked, so I might as well try homeopathy, which is just a sugar pill. That's not going to do him any harm. And I actually went through the process. I don't know how I ended up doing it, but I went through the process online of trying to work out what the right remedy for him was, which, given I had no knowledge of homeopathy, was incredible. And I came to diarrhea. And it was between diarrhea and I don't remember what the other one I was choosing between was. And I spent ages on it, ages and ages trying to work it out. And I literally gave him one dose of diarrhea 30C, and he was lying on his back like a little beetle with his like kicking arms and legs, screaming on his back. And I just put the one ground up some of the pill, put a little bit in his mouth, and he literally, I just watched him just stop. And he unfurled his body, his hands and his legs like this, just unfurled his body. And that was, colic was done.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
And that was, for me, that was my aha with homeopathy. That was when I went, I just saw something.
Because babies don't understand placebo anyway, right? So then it's not placebo, right?
Yeah.
And animals or plants, right? They don't understand placebo. So I love those moments. Mm-hmm.
They're amazing moments. And so even though I'd had that, I still had my pharmacy brain. So when I was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune condition, and when I got my diagnosis, my intuition went homeopathy. I was like, yeah, not really. This is
You didn't want
like
to follow that whisper. You
it's like quite serious. Um, but I don't, and thank goodness I actually paid attention. Went, go on then, I will, because I just didn't want to be on steroids, and I didn't want to go down the road that I was projected to go on, and probably shouldn't actually be here now, if it had continued in the way that it had, and I just was like, okay, I'll do it. And I was so impressed with what I saw, and I'm completely well, and there was a time I was literally like, I'm a raver, I've got loads of energy. I've always been very active, and I was like a very elderly old person who was really kind of arthritic. I could barely move, and I literally overnight found my body again and could move with
wow.
remedies. So I
Was that a classical way, or was that done more in an other remedies? Was it just one remedy, or was it a few, or was it a
so
sequence?
that experience, actually, that particular prescription where I went from literally being completely arthritic to, I felt like I was 80, to just, or older, just being completely able to be in my body again. That was one classical remedy. However, the homeopath who I was seeing at the time, she wasn't a classical homeopath, she was a practical homeopath. And in fact, pretty much most of my connection to homeopathy has been practical, although it's interesting. When I was learning, because I'm very intuitive, I was really drawn to the meditative proving remedies, to the kind of the newer ways of working. I love the classical remedies, but my calling was very much there. And I was at a school where it was a practical school, but I was at a school where they were like, you've got to stick with the classical, you've got to stay here. And it was slightly painful. I felt like I was constantly being shoehorned, but quite rightly so, because in the school that we're in, we're carrying on with that message of we've got to have the grounding, because the classical homeopathy is phenomenal. But what we're doing differently is that we are integrating the teaching of classical with the newer remedies at the same time, but we're making sure that the grounding is very thorough with classical as we go. And so we've got all our students.
So would it be kind of like, if you're going to be a jazz artist, you have to learn the foundation of music, and you have that as your foundation, then you can do the jazz and riff off of that, but you have to have the foundation. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, basically.
That.
And for me, there's this piece around, I found it, maybe it's just me, like I loved learning, but I found it really frustrating having to hold back where my heart was taking me.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's been really important to create a school where we're very clear on the foundation. What's amazing for me is that we're holding a space for the students where we're basically saying, you're going to see from us a range of different ways of working, a range of different ways of prescribing. And we want you to see those differences. And in the process of that, listen to what feels resonant for you, and feel for where you're feeling called to be, because all of us are different. And it's really important to me that our students find a way to connect with who they really are. And all of us have our own way of being, our own way of connecting with the remedies. And I don't believe in everyone like learning one size, because I don't think one size fits everybody. So I'm trying to kind of hold a space for a range. However, those foundations, if we don't have those foundations in place, then the rest of it doesn't matter. And one of the things that we were all talking about how much we love is that we've done this thing where for 3 months, three of us as tutors each received the case of a student, of a different student. And it was amazing how it just organically happened that each one of us tutors was very different in our prescribing. And so the students got to see an array. And yet what was phenomenal was the students got to see how incredible classical prescribing is. And we keep coming back to it, and we keep coming back to it, and what's the one remedy? And then if you want to work beyond that, let's look at that. But what's the one remedy? And they're repertorizing like ninjas. Like we found a way to teach repertorizing in a way that we're all astounded at how quickly the students have just got it. You know, we're working
Is that using a software computer?
No.
I'm curious. Is it software or books?
books, just the books.
Woo! My software computer went down the other day while I was taking a case, and I was like, I have to use the books. I'm like, I have to do it all by hand, like the old methods. I'm like, yikes, as I'm just feverishly writing everything down and using my book. And I was like a mad scientist, you know, like, but it definitely threw me because I'm used to I use a software when I repertoire to find the constitutional remedy. But I was like, oh wow, that's a challenge. So that's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were like, I mean, you know, we have those conversations about the books or the software and stuff. And for me, there's this piece around, again, it's about the foundations. It's like, let's have the foundations because we do never know what's going to happen. What happens if like the internet goes down for days, no one can charge their phone, whatever. We don't know what's going to happen in our world. And so I'm like, actually, if we can do all of the foundations and we can do all of the foundations just from our books, then anything else is a bonus. It's really special. Yeah, so it's really special. So I'm personally not, I've never been particularly classical, but one of the gifts of teaching is that you end up revisiting not just what you've learned, but you're constantly learning yourself in new ways. You never stop learning. And actually we're all talking as teachers about how much we've learned already so far on the journey and how excited we are about what's to come. And one of the things that I've loved learning about has been LMs.
Yeah, I love LMs. LMs are like very gentle, very easy on the body. I've had the experience of taking sepia actually in high potencies like 1M, 10M, and it being very aggravating. And then years later going back to it in an LM and it being still having some healing responses, but in a more gentle and a faster catapult to the healing in that as well. So I love LMs. Yeah.
And it's been really interesting because I used to work at one of the homeopathic pharmacies. I worked at one for 4 years, and one of my favourite places to work actually was with LMs. So I was exposed to LMs for years, and working the LM bench for me was like, it was incredible because it was probably the most meditative space in the pharmacy. You really have to concentrate to work with the LMs, and yet I'd never quite got them in terms of actually taking them because I was so used to all my practical prescriptions, and actually I'm in awe. I'm so in awe, and I'm so grateful for the adventure of expanding my experience and knowledge and learning, and actually I was saying to one of the students the other day who was like, you know, kind of that's interesting because she knows my prescribing, and she said that's really interesting to see you doing this, that you're literally giving like one remedy and it being LM. And I said, I know it is, isn't it? And I said, the thing is, to me, they actually feel a bit like, I talk about how when I'm putting together a prescription, people are like, how do you know when it feels right? And I say, it's a bit like for me, it's a bit like creating a masterpiece of art. And I'm not a natural artist, I don't paint or anything, but it's almost like each remedy is like a color. And I know when it's good because I feel that it's a complete masterpiece. All the colors have just come together. And working with LMs, I've been experiencing, I'm on the spectrum, and so I kind of, I suppose I have these kind of connections with it, but I had this amazing moment when I first really got LMs where I was like, oh, it's a bit like a practical prescription. It feels like it's got that, like a masterpiece piece. It feels like it's got this almost like it's several remedies in one, but it's not, it's just one, but it's like it's like it's going further, but in such a light way. It's remarkable. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it's like deep acting, but in a more gentle way. That's the best way for me to describe it, I find. Like it's a more deep acting in a gentle way. So it's really cool. Yeah.
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 And the golden spiral kind of as a remedy came about because I'd written this book and I'd been in love with the golden spiral, and I'd already been connected with homeopathy and studying and qualified, and it took me, and worked in pharmacies, and it took me a while before I had this complete aha moment of going, how have I not even thought about making this as a remedy yet? Well, because we don't have it. And I'm
Well,
so
I have a
interested in
question about that because it's not made from like most of our classical remedies are made from, say, a mineral or a plant or an animal substance, right? They're made from a substance, but the golden spiral is more like an essence. I'm trying to understand, like, how do you capture that? Is my question. So I
it.
guess.
Really good question. So, like with some of the, if you like the more the imponderables as they're known, um, the ones that don't come from an actual physical substance, yeah, a plant, animal, mineral, a fungus, whatever. Um, it it basically, I do a lot of work in meditation, and I had a vial of alcohol. We make our remedies in alcohol, and I had a vial of alcohol, and I just set the intention. I work with pure source energy, and I surrounded the vial of alcohol with the Fibonacci sequence with images of the golden spiral, and just set the intention that it be made. And I chose an auspicious day or a night, a significant evening astrologically, and just let it be infused really, and created an essence, and then triturated the essence, or made a remedy from the essence, which has now since been triturated, but made it from that. And then when we went to prove it, and this is where, kind of it sounds all a bit like woo, and then you go and do a proving on stuff like this where no one could possibly know what, because provings are basic when someone gets together, when you get a group together of people who are going to test the remedy, and they don't know what they're taking, and then they share what their experiences are. Now, classical provings, you would take the remedy and then you would go away for a month and you would just write notes of everything that you were experiencing in that month. In meditative provings, you will sit in meditation and you share in one sitting. And we found that in our provings group, it's a bit of a combination of the classical and the meditative, in that often there seems to be a consciousness around each remedy when it comes through. And because our provings group is international, I will send remedies a month before the proving out around the world to different people around the world, and I will get messages in the provings group before I've even sometimes told them that there's a proving coming, and people will go, is there a proving coming, because I'm having some strange unusual things going on.
Oh.
And the things that they report are completely and utterly aligned with that remedy.
Wow. It's
And
amazing.
it's incredible. So when we were proving the spiral, people were seeing the spiral, it's incredible. It's such an incredible thing.
That quantum entanglement, that quantum field, it's just, it's out there, yeah. Oh, did we lose her?
Emotionally, spiritually, and that means bringing us into alignment with our lives as well. I joke about how I think sometimes watching our guides and loved ones in spirit and angels and whoever may be overseeing us, for those that might believe that there are those that look down upon us, and guide us, perhaps. I just think, they must look at us and think we must be like herding cats. Because we must have this like soul plan, this life path, and we're there so much of the time going, nope, I want to do this instead, actually. And we go off on tangents, and and we fight that call, the soul's call, and if we fight it hard enough, sometimes really weird things or terrible or scary things will happen to force us to get back onto our life path. Like I got sick, you talked about getting sick, Vanessa, something will happen to make sure we get back on that path. And the golden spiral is an invitation to get back on that path gently. It's a kind of herding cats remedy, is my little joke with it.
My goodness, I love that. I'm one day I'm going to try it. I'm excited to try it myself. I actually just pulled out Lisa's book, who I was in contact with, and it's in here. So this is the provings of the golden spiral. So if anybody wanted to learn more about it, they can do that as well. And we'll put in the show notes. But that's really cool. Like I'm always writing in my books and learning. But so this is like the provings of what people felt, right, and what it will help with and stuff. So very
That's
cool.
an amazing book that Lisa's written, The Trailblazer's Guide.
Yeah, I really love it. I love her other one. I use it all the time. It's such a simple book, the Homeopathy in Your Hand. It's like so simple for quick prescribing, especially for acutes. Like it's just really makes it easy. So it's a
Yeah.
really good one for all people to have in their life.
Danica, what are some examples of case studies or clinical cases that have benefited from the golden spiral remedy?
So it's, well, it's one of the remedies that I give when people have when people have had difficulties with side effects for different reasons, and their body needs a cleanse, because it has that kind of action of bringing the body back into balance. I also I'm very interested in sacred geometry, so I've got a series of sacred geometry remedies. I work with the flower of life, which is really good for cells, and kind of bringing the cells back to some kind of greater alignment. And so I've seen some wonderful things with that. The golden spiral, I've seen it do all sorts of different things. I'm mindful of, I suppose, some of what I share around it, but it's because some of what people experience has been quite deep. It's the only remedy I've consistently, in fact, the only remedy I've ever seen do this, and then I've seen it consistently where patients I'll give it to patients or clients, and they literally, they don't want to stop taking it. And the first time I saw it happen, because it not only does it bring us into alignment, but it really brings this sense of peace and ease of like, oh, it's okay, this is where I am, this is who I am, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is where I am in my life. It's got this lovely peace bringing quality to it. And there's the first time it happened, one of my patients had, she wasn't addicted to anything. And we were having a call, and I mean, we got the call. She's a very easygoing lady and very calm. And she says right at the beginning, she's like, I've run out of golden spiral. And I was like, okay, she was like, am I allowed more of that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, we'll talk about that at the end of the session. So we carry on chatting, and halfway through, completely unprompted, with no relevance to what we were talking about at all, she's like, have I told you I've run out of golden spiral? I was like,
that one back.
Okay. And then at the end, when we were reviewing what I wanted to prescribe her, she went, you have written down that I've run out of the golden spiral. I was
Wow.
like, yeah. And it's one of those remedies, it doesn't get proved. People can just keep taking it. It's not, people don't prove it.
It's more of an essence, right? That's the reason why it would be like that.
Not really. It's because it's a remedy. It's in potency. So we took the essence and potentized it. It's been triturated. So it is definitely in homeopathic frequencies and potencies. But it's more about it. To me, it's about coming back to our blueprint. Our blueprint is geometric. We are made of energy. And the geometric remedies, they are literally an expression of our energy field, of how energy flows and works, of the geometry of our cells, the geometry of our DNA, the geometry of our bodies. And so it's literally a calling back to who we are. And all of us are made of this. It's not like with constitutional remedies, we're looking at remedies that match someone's, personality or archetype, whereas all of us are made of the golden spiral. All of us are made of the flower of life, and all of us are made of love. This is about connecting with the geometry and the vibrations of love. So it's a coming home. These are coming home remedies. So we just don't prove them. But there's another case that it's really good for clearing. So I use it a lot for clearing, and again, that's about alignment. But there was one case that really stood out for me where I had someone come to me who had been on an unbelievable number of drugs for over 20 years, including steroids, had a completely suppressed immune system, had 4 different serious autoimmune disorders, was barely functioning. And we went through pretty much, we went through a huge number of remedies where nothing was working, and remedies that really, are really well indicated, went over things with a fine-tooth comb, when you do all the kind, you really look at a case and you explore the case and you go deep into the case and you repertorize properly and do it all. And none of the indicated remedies worked, whether they were constitutional or therapeutic or miasmatic. It didn't matter. Nothing was working. You detoxification, nothing was working.
Wow.
And then there was this moment where, and I'd given 30C Golden Spiral, and it was the first time actually I thought, because that I find it usually does something for everybody, and it was the first time I was like, gosh, even that hasn't done anything, and I was starting to kind of think, oh, maybe there is, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do here. And then we revisited the case because she said something just in passing that she'd said in her very first session, and I had made a note of it, but there was so much concern about the level of autoimmune disease that she was struggling with, that it was said in passing, and so we hadn't really picked up on it, and it was that she had struggled with anorexia on and off in her life.
Oh, that's huge.
Which is huge, but in the context of everything else, and it was such a byline in everything else that she was going through, and her focus, and I just didn't count it properly. And
That makes sense though, Danica, but it's like a huge portal into the mental, emotional, spiritual, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then when she brought it in a second time, and I was like, oh, we need to go here, and it was so incredible, because it was such a watershed moment, and revisited the case and gave her tarantula. It was really interesting.
You gave her tarantula,
and it really fitted the case actually in several different ways. And when I was looking at it, I remember asking her the question and saying, what are you like when music comes on?
yeah.
And she literally started to cry on the screen. I was like, yeah, when you're like, tick, we've got.
Oh yeah, you're like, that's it, that's the remedy, right? It's like when you're in the repertoire and you sort of keep asking questions, they're like, chick, 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 chick. I'm like, okay, we got the one.
Yeah, absolutely. And she was like, I just miss dancing. It was my favorite thing. I just love music. I loved it. And I was like, right. So I gave her tarantula, and she basically, before we have a breakthrough, sometimes we have to go through that process of things just feeling like they're breaking down. And she had that experience. She was going to A&E almost every day. She'd written goodbye letters to her family. She was convinced she was going to die. She had started feeling suicidal, but she thought she was dying because of another illness. And just all this stuff came up for her that had been so suppressed. And I just, when I saw her in the next session, of course, the huge empathy and, heart going out for, going through the pain of it. And I was looking at her and thinking, okay, we can work now, something's moving. And I gave her Aurum, and I gave her Golden Spiral.
Yeah.
But I gave her Golden Spiral at a higher potency than I'd ever given before. I gave it a 1M, and I love 1M as a potency generally, but I hadn't given Golden Spiral at that potency. And I gave her Golden Spiral 1M daily. And when she came back in the following session, she said she'd spoken to her doctor because she wanted to come off the antidepressants. And the doctor agreed. They were going to work her off the antidepressants. She wanted a full review of all her meds. She wanted to start coming off her meds. She'd gone to see a psychotherapist because she wanted to start therapy. And there was this moment, and I still get goosebumps now as I say it, when she just looked at me through the screen and she said, I have decided I am not going to be ill anymore.
Oh, that's perfect. She's not identifying with that illness anymore. There you go.
I have goosebumps right there listening to that, Nitzer, right? And this ties into the family. There's family work that you do, family constellation, right? Not that I've worked with very many eating disorders, but in psychotherapy, where I've been hanging out for 25 years, it's really hard to work with, and there's such deep entrenched, right, family impact. So could you, and I'm sorry to interrupt your case, but could you tie that in at some point?
Before she goes there, I just want to say that's a really good testament to not give up on anything. Like, I just wanted to point that out, because that person still had that profound change, even though there was a lot of challenges before that. So I want to say, don't give up. But go ahead. I'd love to hear about the family constellations.
And thank you both for both of those sets of comments. And I'll come back to the family constellations in just a sec. I've always said this to myself, and now I say this to my students. If someone's not responding to the remedies you're giving, it's not because homeopathy doesn't work. It's because we haven't got the right remedy or the right potency yet.
Exactly.
And so just keep going. And sometimes, and this was a really difficult case, the level of suppression, the amount of drugs, really heavy duty drugs that this woman had been on for years, it was a really hard case to get through. And I was on the cusp of giving up. Actually, it was her husband, in fact. She was gonna give up, and her husband had said to her, I've got a feeling you've got to keep going. And thank goodness he did. And so there's this piece around just it. I believe homeopathy just really works. And if we haven't quite got there, it just needs relooking at, revisiting. And in terms of it, I mean, it's interesting looking at the constellations. Sometimes there can be patterns in constellation work where perhaps if someone's been through a particular situation, we can see X, Y, and Z consequences of that later on down the field. And one of the things that stood out for me, it's not always the case, but one of the things that has stood out for me, and I don't know if this is the case in this person's history, but I've represented in constellations where there's been someone who's suicidal, and what I found, which I thought was really interesting, was going back in time, perhaps there can have been a massive trauma in the family system where many people in the family died at once, and maybe there was one survivor, or maybe 1, 2, 3 survivors, and maybe most of the family didn't make it. And then there's that survivor guilt and the pain of the grief of not just losing one but losing many, and then in such a tragedy. And what I've seen in constellation is there can be, it's not always the case, but it can be that there's some kind of survivor guilt because something happened going back where many people in a family died at once. And so there's this yearning to literally be buried still, which is what the survivors wanted to be. They wanted to be with their so there can be that. With eating disorders, there can also sometimes be a case, and this is what the founder Bert Hellinger taught, there can be a sense of how the person with the eating disorder maybe one of their parents is actually deep down on a subconscious level, or maybe consciously and hiding it, not wanting to be around, and maybe the child is taking on how their parent feels. Again, it's not always going to be that. It's not always going to be a survivor guilt thing in the trauma. It's always really important to look, like with homeopathy, at the individual situation, the individual case, to look at what's going on in that particular family dynamic and in that particular situation that's unique to this person, and to stay open to whatever the answer is, to not go in and think, oh, this person's got an eating disorder, so it must be that there's some massive tragedy and survivor guilt. We don't know, but it's interesting to me that I could see those things, and it makes sense to me that could be in someone's family history. Like I said, it may not be, but I just thought it was interesting.
Denise, for our listeners who aren't familiar with family constellation, could you just give a little tiny overview snapshot? And then how do you tie that in with homeopathy?
So constellations are a way of looking at a system. And now that could be a family system, or it can be a workplace system, or it can be a profession. So for example, looking at the body of work that is homeopathy, we do constellations in our school. We look at homeopathy as a whole, or we constellate some of the ancestors. And what we find is that in a constellation, what you're doing is you're inviting, in the bigger system, there's a consciousness of that family, say, or that system, there's a bigger consciousness. And if there are challenges within it, it's important to look at where those challenges have come from. Where's the root of the pain? Now, it might be that, say, someone might come along for a constellation. Maybe they're constantly rowing with their brother, and they don't understand why they're rowing with their brother. And the facilitator might say, okay, well, let's have a look at this, and may invite a space where you have a look at what's going on for the person who's brought the issue, for the person who for the brother perhaps. And then we might see actually what they're playing out isn't because of them, it's actually because there was a bigger issue that was the same but just with other relatives maybe 3, 4, 5 generations ago, and they never resolved it. And so that trauma, that pain got stuck and then inherited down, passed down through the genes. We now know that we inherit not just physical the increased risk of physical susceptibilities to physical diseases, that also we now know we inherit trauma. And so what it looks like very practically, if you can do, I do constellations one-to-one mainly, but in a workshop space, if you're in a group of people and say you show up and say I show up and I've got an issue with, say, Joe Bloggs down the road, and the facilitator will say to me, we'll choose someone in this space to represent you. So I will look out and say, right, I'll choose this person to represent me. And it's incredible because the person, as soon as you step into the circle to represent somebody, you do feel and think like they think and feel. It's remarkable, even if you don't know them, which is likely that you don't know them. And then the facilitator will say, okay, choose someone to represent Joe Bloggs. So you'll say, right, I'd like that person to represent Joe Bloggs. And you immediately see what's going on in the dynamic. And then the facilitator might say, is there anything in your family history that you know about that has led to you having these kind of difficulties, or is there a pattern anywhere? And you might go, do you know what, my grandfather kept falling out with this person. So you call in the grandfather, and then you start to see what was going on for the grandfather that never got healed, and so it got passed down. And so they're based on, it was developed by a German psychotherapist called Bert Hellinger, who is now in spirit, who's now passed, but just such incredible wisdom. He was a missionary. He went to South Africa and lived with the Zulu people for 16 years. And he became really interested in how they dealt with challenge. And he never once said that what family constellations are is actually an extension of how the Zulu people look at and deal with challenges. However, speaking to people who have got roots with the Zulu tribe, they will say they recognize this work in terms of how they address challenges. But constellations actually aren't necessarily tied to any one particular tribe. They're about how indigenous peoples, how peoples of the earth know how to deal with challenge. Taoists understand constellations because it's how Taoists also, it's very similar to how Taoists deal with challenges. Different tribes from around the world have all said when they've seen them, there is a familiarity because indigenous peoples know and have the wisdom and the connection. It comes back to the totality, Goethe's totality of a person. They have the connection, they're connected to nature, to source, to the world around them, and they understand the wisdom of looking at the whole picture, calling in the ancestors, looking at the picture and the journey of the ancestors. And I mean, I came across constellations only because I'd gone through a huge trauma and a crisis in my own life, and it was phenomenal for me to see the shift it made, which was in a really, just in the tiniest nutshell, which was that my son had been abusively taken from me through the courts by my ex. And it took a year because of COVID delays and all sorts to get him back. But what I learned in the process of that was that there's this huge epidemic in the US, in Canada, in all parts of the Western world of child separation through the courts, and in really traumatic ways. And abusers have really learned how to play the system so that children get taken from loving parents. And what I realized was that once children are gone, they don't come back. They just don't come back. So the fact that I got my son back was an absolute miracle. And, and I'm not a parent I'm just not a parent who, would be without their child. I'm a very loving mom. And there was a real... And for me, the kind of a really big key moment in all of that was when I went to a constellation. Someone had said to me, have you ever done constellations work? And I said, no. I went along to constellation. And it was not the first one, but the second one I went to, we looked at the journey of the ancestors on our female line, and we went back 7 generations. And what I got to see in that constellation, when I was looking at women representing 7 generations on my mum's line, and what we could see was that every single one of them had had a child taken because of abuse or mental illness, except for one. And I just was like, oh my God. And it's like it's the repeating patterns. And then I had remembered a story I had long forgotten because I hadn't been in touch with my dad for a very long time. But he had been taken from his mother at the age of 2 by his father and forbidden from being raised by her, by his war traumatized dad. So it was on both sides. I was like, oh my God. So I did the work. I did the work to bring healing to my ancestors. My son came home. And the link between constellations and homeopathy is that homeopathy, with homeopathy, one of the ways in which we can work that Dr. Hahnemann taught is that we can work with inherited susceptibility to disease. We call those miasms. And to me, basically, constellations are a way of working miasmatically. And I've had some wonderful conversations with some homeopaths who are constellators who've said that they really feel that, had Hahnemann continued to live and had come to this point, he would have got to the point where he wasn't just looking at physical inherited disease traits and the mental emotionals that come with that, but he would have gone to that place of going, and what happens in the ancestral field too, because that's the next step. That is literally the next expanded logical step. And actually we've tied it in the other way. So I went and trained in constellations work because I was so in awe of it. It's some of the deepest. It's sometimes doing a really good constellation, it can be like doing 6 months therapy. It's so deep. And constellations are about revealing truth. And we've done amazing things at our school because we've embedded constellations into the way in which we practice in our school. Sometimes I constellate if I get stuck in a case and I can't find my way through it or see it. Sometimes I'll do a constellation on it. But what we do at the school is we constellate the history. So we will invite people to represent key figures from homeopathic history so we can see their stories. And one of my favorite moments of doing this was we were going to do a constellation actually on James Tyler Kent. I'm fascinated by his childhood, and I told everyone we're doing a constellation on James Tyler Kent. And that morning of school, there was one of our students arrived, and she's flat bellied, and she literally looked like she was 9 months pregnant. And she was trying not to cry. She came up to me. She was like, Danica, look at me. I don't know what's going on. And I said, I don't know. And we went in, and I spent an hour teaching about the Four Masters and Melanie. And we finished that hour. We're about to go into constellation, and one of the students puts her hand up, and she goes, "What was the name of Dr. Hahnemann's first wife again?" And I said, "Henrietta." And literally, when I said Henrietta, you could literally feel in the room the energy go vroom. And we've got students online as well as in person. And I looked at the screen and I said to everyone, I was like, to all of you online, did you all feel that too? And literally everyone's there going, yeah. And we realized that this student had arrived already representing Henrietta. And we worked out that she was representing Henrietta at the point in time where she was pregnant with their 11th and last child. So they already had 10 children. So we literally had not just Henrietta represented, we then called in 10 of the students to represent each of the children who were alive at that point. And what we got to see was their rage at him, and particularly her rage at him. The reason we get to practice this incredible system of medicine and make a difference in the world that we do is because he was completely devoted to his work and a completely absent husband and father.
Yep.
And so now every day when we start school, we always when we have live days, we always begin the day with a welcome and a gratitude, and a meditation and a prayer up to and connecting with the homeopathic ancestors. And we name many of the greats that have passed, and some of the even bigger greats before Dr. Hahnemann, Paracelsus and so on. And since then, we always name Henrietta and the 11 children because of their sacrifice, and thank them for their sacrifice because we're learning because of what they gave us. So there's this real journey that we're going on in terms of bringing the history to life in our school, using constellations so that everyone can really feel and experience homeopathy in a much bigger way.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's a really powerful story. Really, really incredible. And that was a huge sacrifice that they gave. And you shared so many things. I mean, this constellations in general and the story about your son and all the patterns that, you like breaking that pattern right now, finally. And wow, really incredible. And it sounds like really synergistic modalities to merge together and really make powerful movements in people's lives and health. And not only are we, impacting the now, you're impacting the past and the present, which is how I see it. So it's just like, it's incredible. So amazing, amazing stuff. I'm curious to share a little bit about your offerings and your schooling and how people get involved in that. And I know that you not only have the golden spiral, you have other remedies behind there. There are other essences that you've created. So where can we learn more about your other essences that you've created, your schooling, family constellations? Like, tell us all the things. And yeah.
So, so the school is called the Golden Spiral International School of Homeopathy. You can just do a Google search, find out more. We've been so blown away by the response to the school. We've got such amazing tutors working with us, and we started as one kind of year group, and we're expanding. That's got a base in the UK, but we've got students from around the world joining us. We are starting a centre in September in the US, and starting a centre in Australia in September too. So we're going to have 3 centres this September, and already the spaces are pretty much half full, and we haven't even started advertising yet. So
That's
so
great.
we keep pinching ourselves. It's incredible, and it is a true family. We talk about the Golden Spiral family. It's this real sense of, for me, it's really important that everybody finds their own way, their own voice, who they really are. Occasionally people will go, I just want to be like Danica, and I'm like, don't ever, no, don't be like me, you be like you. And so there's this real kind of, it's a journey of empowerment together, people really finding who they are, and it's deep, it's beautiful. And so that's the Golden Spiral School. I have a whole range of remedies that I have made. The Golden Spiral is just one. Flower of Life, the petrified sequoia, which was incredible. We just did a school trip to the Bosnian pyramids and made a remedy in the Bosnian pyramids, which was mind-blowing. We're about to release that. A whole heap of other remedies. Mastic gum. We proved T-Rex. We also proved T-Rex, which was an amazing experience.
Wait. What's T-Rex?
The Tyrannosaurus Rex, literally made from a fossil. It was made from a fossil. The remedy was made from a fossil. That it's actually a remedy that Helios have, that our group went and proved. So we didn't make the remedy, we just did the proving. But we've done some amazing provings. Those remedies are available through Stella in the UK, through Eugenie Kruger's shop, through PS11. There's also going to be one other place in the States soon. We've got and then we've got essences. They're called the Blueprint Essences, which started because of the Golden Spiral, where we did the proving of the Golden Spiral. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, literally everyone on the planet could do with this. Plants love it. It's amazing for everybody. And I was saying to my friend, but not that many people use homeopathy. Like, how can I get this out there? Because this is really important for people. And she said, why don't you make an essence from it? And so the the Blueprint Essences started because I then took the Golden Spiral essence and made it available as an essence. And we have 114 now because I'm neurodiverse and couldn't stop with one. And in terms of constellations work, people can find out more about that. And I just want to add and finish by saying, that journey that I went through with my son, which was unbelievably painful. And yet we're in this incredible space where 3 years down the line, nearly, we're in a place where I'm completely at peace with his father, so much so that there's been kind of really genuine, heartfelt exchanges, which again is unheard of when you've walked through the kind of things that we've walked through. And and I put it down to the work, and I put it down to, kind of that commitment and dedication to clearing the ancestral stuff that brings us to, to the points that we can come sometimes. And so the constellations work people can find out more about by going to Danica Apolline Matić.com, and that's there. So yeah, I think that's
Well, this has been amazing. I have one other last question just came to mind. Do you prescribe the golden spiral in conjunction with a constitutional, or do you kind of treat it like a constitutional separately, or would you prescribe both?
so I tend to give it, when I do give it, sometimes I'll give it just on its own,
Right.
as a constitutional, but usually I'll give it as an extra in addition to something else. So whether it's constitutional, miasmatic, triad. I do also use it for anyone who does detoxing. I use it in detoxing. I use it as a sometimes I use it in a combination purely for detoxifying certain things, and other times if someone's using tautopathy, I will give it as a Saturday remedy, because it's really good at supporting the clearing process again, because it's about the body coming into alignment, so it helps the body to just release what doesn't keep it in alignment. So it's a really nice add on there.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. This has been so much fun, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you,
so
Danica.
much. Really lovely to meet you both. Thank you for this time.